In the night, her alibi fell apart. I never wanted to be the kind of man who checks the glow of his wife's phone and counts how long she laughs at a message that doesn't include me. But that's where it began, at the seam between suspicion and silence, the place where love starts to drift from fact to fiction. I was in the kitchen, rinsing espresso cups when the phone danced across the counter like a guilty insect. A name I didn't recognize. A preview that read, "You were right about the elevator." 9:15. The words were harmless in isolation. Together, they had the temperature of a fever. Anna, my wife, was in the next room folding laundry with the clinical precision of a hotel maid. When I carried her the phone, she didn't look up. She said thanks, slid it into her back pocket, kissed my cheek, and went on folding. Then she told me her friend Dasha needed help at a gallery pop-up. She said she'd be out late. She said not to wait up. She always said not to wait up, and for years I never had. That night I did. I work in a tower of glass where every secret is visible if you know which pane to look through. My title, risk manager, has always been a modest synonym for professional worrier. I assess probabilities like other people chew gum, and I had been ignoring the obvious math at home because it felt disloyal to count. But here was the equation: a message, a meeting time, an elevator. I didn't need a solution to know I had a problem. I told myself I would prove my suspicion wrong. That was the trick. I'd go to the gallery, see the crowd, find Anna laughing with Dasha under neon lights, kiss my wife's temple, and carry her home like nothing in the world had shifted. It would be a story we'd tell later, wry and harmless. Remember when I got paranoid and you were just helping sell prints? That was the story I wanted. I changed my shirt and left the apartment at 8:50. The gallery was a 20-minute ride and not somewhere I wanted to be recognized. So I took the long way, walking briskly until I found a taxi without a driver who recognized me from the office. I stared out the window as we moved through the city, our district's polite facades giving way to an older part where the streetlights throw a buttery shade that softens everything into a nostalgia you didn't earn. The gallery was open, the kind of pop-up in which everything looks expensive because nothing is priced. Young people in subdued blacks and ironic hats held drinks that probably had names. Dasha was there, glowing with the administrative pride of someone who has arranged chaos into profit. Anna was not. I asked Dasha, and she performed a surprised frown that had been rehearsed. She said, "I thought she was with you." Then she sipped something transparent and turned to greet a man whose coat had more buttons than I have patience. The message 9:15 vibrated inside my head. The elevator, which elevator? Our building had 3. My office tower had 16, but the hotel next to our office, the Mirador, had a glass elevator that peeled itself up the building's face like a tongue. The city had been posting videos of it since it opened. Lovingly shot clips of couples rising into the night. It was an elevator for people who wanted to be seen not seeing themselves. I walked there feeling stupid and awake. The Mirador lobby smelled like mints and new money. On the far side was the famous elevator, a transparent column of promise. I checked my watch. 9:12. I felt my heart change its shoes. I positioned myself where the lobby's mirrored panels would show me the inside of the elevator when the doors opened. Then I tried to look like a man who could afford to be there. I even took a call from no one, phone to ear, murmuring yes, fine, tomorrow. At 9:15, the elevator touched down with perfect indifference. 2 couples stepped out, laughing, and then a woman in a red coat emerged alone. She was Anna, but she walked like her, and for a moment I understood how men lose their minds over silhouettes. She went straight to the bar and disappeared. I was about to admit I was an idiot when the elevator returned like déjà vu. Anna stepped out, not alone. She had her hair pulled back the way she does when she wants to look organized. The man beside her was taller than me and wearing an overconfident navy suit. She was smiling in a way I hadn't seen in months, loose, lit from inside, a smile with no errands attached. She touched his sleeve with her fingers, the way a person touches a thought they're afraid to say out loud. I would tell you that I went over there, that I strode across the marble and spoke my name into the quiet between them and took my wife home and demanded the rest of our lives explain themselves to me. But I didn't. I watched as the man leaned in and said something that pivoted her smile into a look of consideration. They moved toward the bar, toward a corner my angle couldn't reach. A reflection captured them in that perfect, distorted way that makes lovers look like they're standing inside each other. I know the math of risk. Confrontation in a lobby equals scene. Scene equals humiliation. Humiliation equals defensive lies. Lies equal distance. Distance equals the slow death I'd been pretending not to feel for months, so I didn't interrupt. I followed. They took the elevator again to the roof. The Mirador's rooftop bar is a garden of glass bowls with flames inside, a place built for small, serious speeches on thin lips. I reached the top and stayed near the door. Cold air carried the city's thousand separate lives as sound, and I recognized the particular pitch of my own life breaking. I watched them settle into a corner with those little blue flames flickering between them, a theatrical distance that wants to be crossed. I needed to know who he was. That was the clean detail, the one fact that could bear the weight of all the messy ones. I circled the bar pretending to admire the view, then drifted close enough to catch the chemical signature of his cologne. He had a hotel key card on the table, a mirror of the Mirador logo catching the flame. I read his wristwatch brand because I'm that kind of man, and when he reached to tap his phone, I saw his lock screen, a black and white photograph of a coast road and the initials VK. I took out my own phone and opened our building's internal directory. We share pipelines with the Mirador's parent company. Their executives sometimes haunt our elevators, being proud of themselves where more modest people would be ashamed. VK could be anyone, but I know names and patterns. In my head, I sorted them. On my phone, I searched them. That's when I found him. Victor Koval, Director of Expansion for Mirador Hospitality. I scrolled through a press release photo. The jawline matched the man's profile like a question pressed against an answer. Victor Koval. I said it to myself quietly, like a spell you cast to undo yourself. And then he said something to Anna that made her tilt her head and stare at the sky. He reached across the flame and touched her wrist. My chest became a drum. I didn't approach them. Not yet. I texted Dasha. You said Anna would be with you. Dasha responded with a single cherry emoji. It felt like an insult or an accident. I put the phone away and realized I wasn't alone anymore. Someone stood beside me, gazing over the railing with the flat interest of a person who memorizes other people for work. He wore a short gray coat and a face that was too kind for security, too skeptical for sales. He looked at me the way you look at a man, standing next to a fire long enough to burn without noticing. He said, "First time here." I told him no. He nodded like I'd told him the price of a thing and it matched his guess. Then he said, "People come up here to make decisions they've wanted to make for months." He didn't wait for my response. He left, and I watched Victor slide the key card into his jacket like a punchline. What I did next was not brave. It was precise. I walked down 2 floors to the business lounge and asked the concierge if someone had turned in a black leather card wallet. I described mine, which of course didn't exist, and while she searched, I watched the elevators. When one opened empty, I stepped inside, pressed the button for the 12th floor where I knew the standard room sat quietly between meetings and mistakes, and slid my hand against the seam of the elevator panel until it gave me what I wanted, a glimpse of the service code. I've never believed in fate, but I do believe in people with sloppy habits. Housekeeping came on at 10:00 p.m., and it was 9:48. I waited in the hallway like a shadow with a reason. When the cart rounded the corner, I put a hand to my chest and forced my breath quick. I told the housekeeper I'd stepped out without my key, pointed at a door as if it could be any door, and smiled with the exhausted apology of businessmen everywhere. She hesitated, but then she looked at my shoes and at the navy blazer I'd put on to seem like someone who carries a card that works. She tapped the master key and the door blinked green. I thanked her, slipped inside, and locked the latch. I stood there in the scented quiet and told myself I had about 10 minutes to decide what kind of man I was going to be. I didn't drink the minibar. I didn't open the curtains. I dimmed the lights and sat at the desk. The room was perfect the way all hotel rooms are perfect, like a person who has learned how to be desired without being known. I set my phone on the table and sent Anna a message I knew she wouldn't read yet. "Come home if you can. I'm awake." She didn't reply. I heard them before I saw them. The hushed efficiency of people who think they're being careful. The click of a key card. The soft surprise of discovering a light already on. Victor stepped in first, and I saw the precise instant he understood the room was occupied. His eyes went black in the way ambitious men's eyes go when they're calculating. Anna was behind him, and in that tight corridor of a second before anyone spoke, I watched my wife become two people at once, the one who had married me and the one who had found a new way to be seen. I said, "Good evening, Mr. Koval." He smiled a politician's smile that had still not decided whether I could be bought. Anna said my name as if it were a prayer with bad timing. She moved toward me and then away, as if proximity were a betrayal to both of us. Victor looked at her and then at me, and then at the hotel phone as if it were a lifeboat. I asked if we could sit. I asked it like a gentleman asking for the check. We arranged ourselves around the little glass table meant for breakfast trays and confessions. The city hummed below us, grateful to be outside our story. Victor folded his hands and said, "I'm sure there's a reasonable way to discuss this." It was the sort of sentence that thinks it can buy time while it prices the damage. I told him I didn't care about reasonable. I cared about accurate. I cared about names and dates and how a person gets from a perfectly good life to a room like this. Anna had always been honest, even when honesty hurt, but she had also learned from me the art of saying only what was asked. I didn't ask her if she loved him. I asked her when it started. She said the word spring and it fell between us like a season. Victor breathed through his nose in a way that suggested he'd been coached by someone who charges a fee. He asked what I wanted. Money, silence, time. He said each as if it were a different currency he could exchange at the desk downstairs. I told him I wanted him to resign from his current project, the one that involved acquiring the building where my company rents 3 floors at a rate he'd been planning to hike. I told him I knew his schedule, his meetings, his leverage. I told him if he did not resign, I would make a presentation to his board that connected his expansion strategy to a conflict of interest involving a certain employee's spouse. It was unclean, but it wasn't untrue. He looked at Anna, and I understood more than I wanted to about how men like him love, fiercely as long as it also serves them. He asked if I was blackmailing him. I said I was giving him a choice. He asked what I would do about my wife. I told him that was between us. He laughed then, a small, genuine sound as if the absurdity had finally clarified the scene for him. He said he'd think about it. I stood and said he had until noon tomorrow. Then I told Anna I was going home, and that she could come with me if she wanted. She did, not because she had to, but because the person she became in that room scared her a little. We walked through the lobby like a family leaving a museum, quiet and excessively polite. Outside, the night pushed its cool palm against our faces. We called a taxi and sat with our knees touching like strangers on a train. Halfway home, she reached for my hand. I let her take it. What I didn't tell her right then is that none of this had begun with Victor. It had begun with the small, daily neglects we'd both permitted, with a calendar that kept us neighbors in our own life. It had begun with me counting risks at work and ignoring them at home. It had begun with her looking for a room where she felt like a person again and not a function. It's obscene to acknowledge sometimes, but betrayal is rarely about sex and almost always about gravity. Who pulls you back to yourself most strongly when the elevator doors open? At home, we sat at the kitchen table, the scene of 1,000 breakfasts and 24 arguments. She brewed tea the way she does when she needs her hands to be busy. The kettle hissed like it had been holding its breath for us. She started to apologize, and I stopped her, not because she didn't need to, but because apology is not a bridge. It's a mirror, and we needed a road. We made a deal that would appall any romantic who's never had to rebuild a real life. 30 days. For 30 days, we'd live together deliberately, not as habit but as choice. We'd take walks without our phones. We'd eat at the table even when we were tired. We tell each other what we wanted, even if what we wanted was to sit in different rooms and breathe. After 30 days, we'd decide. It wasn't elegant, but it was a framework, and this is how people like me survive, by building frames sturdy enough to hold the weight of a heart. At 11:56 the next morning, Victor sent me an email from his corporate account. It was formal and careful and said he decided to reallocate his focus to a different market. He CC'd 2 vice presidents and a woman from legal. I replied with a sentence that could live in a courtroom. Received, thank you. I closed my laptop and went to the window. Down in the street, people were doing what they always do, which is to say, surviving their own calculations. That night, Anna and I took a walk along the river. We didn't hold hands at first. We noticed ordinary things and said them out loud. The dog that trotted like a soldier, the boy learning to skateboard, the couple eating sunflower seeds and pretending their laughter had no consequences. She told me she'd chosen the elevator because she thought transparency would save her from herself. I told her secrets don't evaporate just because you can see them. Sometimes they grow more beautiful. We did not decide anything that night. We built a small place where a decision might eventually live. When we got home, she touched my face with careful fingers and asked if I still wanted her. It would be braver to say I answered immediately. I didn't. I let the question sit between us until the silence said something true. That desire, like trust, is less a switch than a dimmer, a light you adjust by degrees until the room looks like a place you can recognize yourself. We kissed in the hallway as if it were the first room we'd ever shared. It was a kiss with memory and argument and hunger folded into it, but it was also just the warm, ordinary press of a mouth that has nothing to prove. When I finally slept, it was beside her. I woke before dawn and watched her lashes twitch against the pillow and thought about probabilities again, about the way you can load the dice by changing the rules of the game instead of praying for a lucky throw. In the weeks that followed, we found ourselves practicing a strange, disciplined kindness. She deleted hotel numbers. I changed the way I arrived home earlier, with food, my phone face down in the bowl where we throw our keys. We fought 3 times, each fight a little less about winning and more about numbing what we refused to pretend wasn't there. On the 30th day, we walked back to the gallery where it had not begun. Dasha hugged us both as if she hadn't fed the world cherries. We bought a photograph of a coast road in black and white. We hung it above our table, and the initials VK in my memory meant something else now. Victory, maybe, but the small kind you count quietly. I don't tell this story to prove that love survives anything. It doesn't. It survives what you're willing to rebuild, and some ruins are better left to the sea. But I tell it because on the night her alibi fell apart, mine did too. the alibi that said I was the kind of man who didn't have to fight for his own life. Now, when I pass the Mirador, I watch the elevator run up the building like a clear thought. I think of the people inside, believing transparency will save them from their choices. I hope for a moment that they are right, and then I go home,